Dating is entirely an economics problem. It is economics. Economics meaning there, in my days when I met Nibal, she was one of 14 friends I knew. Okay. The economics were very straightforward. Of the 14, Nibal was the one that matched my soul most. She was the most beautiful woman on the planet for those 14 and everyone else. And so I said, I'm after this one. Today, from a supply and demand point of view, you're talking about 14 million people at any point in time that are in a market that is so complex. It's like the NASDAQ market. Literally, products are on the market instantly all the time. And the game isn't a game of economics. Sadly, the more supply there is, the less the value of a product, right? So if you simply said to yourself, you know, this camera is now going to be, we're going to make 14 million copies of it because it's easier for the factory to make 14 million copies than to make 4,000. Every one of those copies, to manage to sell 14, has to go down in price, because otherwise only people who can afford the 4,000 will buy, and then you'll be left with the other 10. And that's what's happening in the dating and romance market, is that there is so much supply out there that nobody values that relationship anymore. Everyone is like, okay, I'll try anyway. You know, it going to take a couple of dates, but then that's not what happened. You go on a couple of dates and then it's a nice kiss and then you stay a little longer and then, right? And all of that, basically you realize that you've spent 7 months of your life to figure out that this person is not interested in children. For example, if we take that example, the way to do it is the other way around, is to go to the Shelby Cobra Club, go to the place where people are interested in you as their dream, and then 100% of them will be chasing you, and your price goes through the roof. Everyone goes like, oh my God, finally I found my Shelby Cobra. I'm going to go behind that Shelby Cobra. I'm going to do whatever it takes, whether it's commitment, whether it's, changing myself a little bit, or whatever that is, to earn the right to be with my.
Hey, what up, you two? You already know what it is. It's another episode of Making the Case. We're on episode number 122. All right. And if you can't tell by my opening clip, we're talking about supply and demand as it relates to the dating market. I'm your host, none other than Dr. Jacob Isom. And we're going to get straight to it. Okay. We had two channel norms though. One, we attack points and our people, and then two, we don't do all that cussing derogatory stuff because we're professional over here. Now let me say a couple things before we do jump straight into it. Now, a lot of times people don't either want to or don't think about dating and relationships in terms of economics or in terms of business. Okay. Now, I myself do, because I wrote a whole book kind of based on that ideology and that premise. Okay. The Relationship Guide, Business Science of Reasoning, jacobisom.com, Amazon. You need to check it out. Okay. Shameless plug. But I mean, it's real simple. I give you my own personal case, okay? Not to brag or anything. I would say myself being in the dating market, I'm in demand, right? One, I'm a black man. Even though they say when it comes to the dating market, white men then black men, but I will say that when you look, when you observe, right, what nationality of men is with a number of different races. Well, we know black women, most of them, 85 to 90% of them only want a black man, right? When it comes to white women, forget about it. When it comes to dating outside their race, it's black men, right? We can go on and on, right? What's the race of type of man that they typically, now I will say Asian women typically go after white men. But you'll see Asian women with black men as well. But I'm an educated black man. I do well for myself financially, right? Um, I will say that I'm pretty decent looking. Oh, stop. All right. So I would say that I'm in demand, right? And the market for me shows this, right? Um, I date anywhere from women to who have multiple degrees to women who, don't. Okay. But yet and still, this is what happened though. Okay. And you know what? I might just pause that. I'm gonna save it for the rest of the video because I got some good. I got a very good video for you that breaks this down. So I'm gonna save that. But yet and still, it's all about supply and demand. And what we do see is that there's a small number of men who command a lot of attention from a lot of women, okay, who can date multiple women at the same time or just, back to back to back to back. Okay, I don't like this, I don't like that. But then you got a large pool of men that only have a sliver of women to choose from. Okay. And now we're talking about seriously dating, courting for marriage, right? We're not talking about knocking the boots and hookups and things of that nature. Okay. So that's the premise that we're kind of going off of in this video. Okay. We're talking about seriously dating, marriage, commitment, things of that nature. Okay. And when we look at the dating market, which we call the SMB, a sexual market value place, what we see is that it's distorted, right? Social media has a big part of that. Women's standards have a big part of that. Men economic viability has a big part of that, and we're going to break that down in this episode. Okay, got a real good video that breaks it down economically to a T. Okay, so without further ado, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get into the video. Let's break this down. We're talking about supply and demand in the dating market and why you need to pay attention to it if you're single. Let's get it.
You get flaked on when trying to arrange meetups, and you probably find texting an absolute nightmare for keeping a woman interested. Meanwhile, if you're a woman, chances are you don't have these issues, but instead face a barrage of lackluster quality guys. Quantity isn't a problem, but quality is. And for the small percentage you do consider date-worthy, you find they are preoccupied with other aspects of life, or they aren't serious and just want to date casually. Based on these points, it should be clear that the current dating system isn't benefiting most people, both for men and women. Well, in this video, as I'm going to explain, it may surprise you that all of these problems are in fact predictable and ingrained in the modern dating system. The dating market, just like any market, is guided by market forces. These forces should, in theory, lead to a system that is fair and balanced. However, I've identified 3 points of failure fixed into the system that are causing problems to take place.
Here's how I went from burnout to booked as a full-time photographer with the help of my bestie, Honeybook. When I first started my business, it used to...
Let me introduce you to the economic principle of market failure, which, for a really quick explanation, if you've not heard of this before, it is exactly what it says in its name. This is when the market, in this case the dating market, leads to suboptimal outcomes that do not benefit some or all of the people it is supposed to serve. There are 7 types, and usually just one of these can lead to the system being broken. Well, as stated, 3 apply to the dating market, which in other words means there are 3 unavoidable points of failure that are causing all sorts of problems in dating. Anyway, let's break down these 3 points one by one, starting with inequality. It's no surprise the dating market is unequal. Using the Lorenz curve, which is the most common way to measure inequality in any given system, we'll be able to see just how big the gap is between the men at the top, middle, and bottom. It works like this. Population is on the x-axis and the share of a particular thing is on the y-axis. And in a perfectly equal system, we'd have a completely straight Lorenz curve. This means 50% of the population get 50% of the cumulative share, 70% get 70%, 90 get 90, and so on. So no matter where you are in the system, you will be on equal terms compared with your neighbour. This chart is most often used in an economic sense to measure levels of income inequality in countries. For example, the Lorenz curve for America looks...
Now, and even with the Lorenz curve, right, we understand, even though things are supposed to operate when it comes to equality or equity or whatever you want to say, that we know in actuality, in practicality, they don't work that way, whether economics or dating. Just want to point that out. Let's continue.
Like this, where the top 20% takes home a little over 50% of the country's income. This is expected as we all know the people at the top in a country like America are faring way better than those at the bottom. Now let's take a look at how things are in the dating market. To make this work, instead of measuring wealth, we'll substitute in Tinder likes. Now, I know a lot of people might roll their eyes about using Tinder to provide data, but at the same time, this will be able to give us a rough idea. And besides, Tinder is the world's largest dating app with over 75 million users, so sample size is not an issue. Additionally, studies show dating apps are now the #1 way couples meet. So as I say, using Tinder likes definitely not a perfect measure, but this will be able to give us a rough idea of dating market inequality. Anyway, the Lorenz curve for men on Tinder looks like this. Shockingly, it's actually more unequal than America is in terms of income. Noticeably more. On Tinder, the top 10% of men get 58% of the likes. Meanwhile, for the bottom 50% of men, they get just 4.3%.
Now, I want you to look at those numbers right there on the screen. Look at those numbers. 10% of men get 58% of the likes. 50% get 4.3. That explains a huge gap when it comes to dating, right? It shows you that when women go after the same type of men, while the men are scrounging for women, right? They want the women that the top 10% of men are getting, okay? And what typically happens is when the women get frustrated and they get older, they have a bunch of kids, then they'll go down to that bottom 50% and be like, hey, I'm available. Okay. Some men scoop them up. Some men like, get out of here. You ain't want me back then. Now I'll hide you all on. Okay. This is what's happening in the dating market. Supply and demand. Let's keep going.
And the reason I find this so glaring is because we hear on the news all the time about income inequality, how terrible it is, and what should be done about it. But when the exact same thing is happening in the dating market, it seems no one even cares about it. Now, some of you might point out that I've only spoken about the inequality for men, when really this should also apply for women as well, because men are no different in their dating choices. And for those that think this, you're right, it does apply to women. The top 10% of women get 45% of likes from men, which again shows a big inequality. But the reason I'm focusing mainly on men is because notice how the share of likes is less equal for men than for women. The bottom 50% of women has nearly twice the share than the bottom 50% of men. This suggests that women have their eyes focused on the top guys more than men have theirs focused on the top women. On top of this, when you factor in the ratio of these apps and that men swipe way more than women in general, you'll find even below average women can accumulate a sizable number of matches in a short period of time. So the bottom line is, on dating apps, there is only one group of people who will indefinitely have a matches screen that looks like this. And that group is below average men.
And that is extremely important because men get frustrated, right? Men have no choice but to settle. Men have no choice but to take what the market gives them, right? Whereas women, they'll get a bunch of likes and they'll get a bunch of attention for men who just want to sleep with them, right? They don't want anything serious. That they're just going after them because it might be an easy life, right? That's the game. That's the market. It kind of is what it is. And it's not going to change as long as most women are going after the top guy. And then most men are also liking the top women. But at the end of the day, in reality, they really want to sleep with those. Now, they would love to settle down with those women, but they know they can't. They have more of a realistic idea about where they are in the dating market than women do. Based on, and the reason why he's focusing on dating apps is because, once again, like he already said, most people are on them. 75 million people, right? That's where people are meeting nowadays. So it makes sense to focus on that. We're going to fast forward into the second market failure that he's talking about.
Now moving on to the second point of market failure. This is known as asymmetric information. Let's say you're looking to buy a second-hand car. You go online and find almost immediately what appears to be a very alluring deal. The car is only a few years old, has low miles, and is well under the market price. So, you do the obvious thing and arrange to meet the seller and buy it, thinking you've got an amazing deal. Anyway, for the next 6 months, everything is smooth, that is, until, suddenly, loads of problems start arising with the car. The gearbox had to be replaced, as did the clutch. You got them both repaired straight away, and at this point, since you've been frustrated twice, you made the wise decision to get an inspection from a car mechanic in order to prevent any more unforeseen damages. And unfortunately, the mechanic leaves you shocking news. He says the mileage of the car is actually 3 times higher than what it reads on the odometer. You also find out it's 5 years older than what it says on the reg. You now become very angry and get rid of the car, swearing you'll never drive again. Anyway, the purpose of this story is to highlight the problem of asymmetric information in a marketplace. The car seller knew information about the car that undermined your ability to make rational decisions as a buyer. How does this principle also apply to the dating market? Well, just like there's information someone can hide about a car, there is also information people can hide about themselves that makes them look like a better option than they truly are. A woman may have been a notorious cheater in her past. She may have cheated on every single one of her previous partners. Similarly, she may have an extremely high partner count. But the thing is, unless you actually know this information, her past has zero effect on your perceptions of her dateability. For all you know, you're dating a perfectly sweet and normal girl.
And of course, this is a problem for men and women, but particularly when it comes to men, because men are the one getting down on one knee. Men are the one that's putting a lot online when it comes to marriage, when it comes to a commitment. So essentially, this principle, what it's talking about when it comes to the market failure, is that not only are women lying to themselves because they really think they're harder than they really are, and they really think they're more valuable than they really are. So when you're able to lie to yourself, and then of course you're going to go and lie to somebody else, right? So sometimes like it's unintentional, but then other times, yes, women understand that they're lying about their body count. They understand that they know they don't have no value. They know all they bring to the table is looks. Okay. So they're bringing a representative, they're bringing, and they're going to be a chameleon. They're going to fool a lot of men when it comes to this. And then once people get comfortable and let their guard down, that's when their true self come out. This is when you see breakups. This is when you see divorces. But of course, women don't want to leave with nothing, right? This when you see the ugly divorces, alimony, spousal support, and all this stuff. Okay? But this is a problem in the market because this makes men not even want to commit. And you hear all these women saying, well, men don't want to commit. They don't want to get married. This is part of the reason why. Okay. I'm going to fast forward into the third one. We're going to wrap it up.
Then it's only a matter of months, or God forbid, years further down the line, problems are a medium-sized town. And this town gets all of its water supply just a few miles away from this single lake. The lake has no rivers that flow into it, so it has to rely on rainfall to maintain its size. Everyone understands if the lake is exploited, it may dry up one day, so protecting it is extremely important. However, there is one big problem. The people may understand the lake's importance as a collective, but as individuals, unless you introduce laws or limits on how much water each person can use, it means there is nothing that can stop anyone from taking more from the lake than they should. Anyway, because of this problem, what ends up happening is 10% of the people turn a completely blind eye to the lake's preservation. They decide to grow extensive lawns, wash their vehicles daily, and install fountains, which are all very water intensive. And in the short term, this 10% are very happy. But unfortunately, this was never sustainable, and slowly but surely the lake dried up, ruining it for everybody. This is called the tragedy of the commons, and the exact same issue happens in overfishing, over deforestation, and over mining, all for the same reasons. And as you probably guess, this also happens in the dating market. Think of the lake example again, but swap out the lake for the dating pool of women and the town for the pool of men. Now think of the 10% who use up the water as the top 10% of men in the dating market. Remember, at the very start of the video, I explained how the dating market is extremely unequal, particularly for men. So, when the top 10% have abundance and can date multiple women at the same time, it means other guys are left out. It might be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of you, but the dating market is a zero-sum game. Meaning, if I date a woman and take her off the market, that's one less woman you could now potentially date. And this isn't necessarily a problem if there are equal numbers of men and women, because eventually everyone will have a partner. But the problem arises when a small minority of guys date multiple women at the same time, leaving the other men left out. It's a matter of fact, over 2,000 years ago, the rulers realised how this setup was unsustainable, so to counteract this, they introduced laws of monogamy, which created a one-to-one balance for men and women, making sure people weren't left out. But funnily enough, in the last couple of decades, we've seen a complete dismantling of these values. And once again, we're in a situation where a few men at the top are dominating the market, while the people at the bottom are being ostracised. Anyway, that's it for the 3 ways market failure applies to the dating market. And maybe I'll make a solutions video to these problems.
All right, I thought that was a great breakdown of the dating market and kind of what the issues are in the dating market. I've never really seen anybody really break it down that way, other than Whole Math. I mean, he does a great job with it. Shout out to him. Go follow his channel if you really want to get the breakdown on masculine and feminine nature and a whole bunch of other things. But and that last part was so critical when you talking about monogamy was introduced. I say it all the time, right? Finding somebody else said it, right? Monogamy is not natural. Monogamy, just like monotheism, was introduced to people, right? We always been polygamous. We always been polytheistic, right? That's our natural state. But in order for control, in order to make sure we have laws in place and things of that nature, we need these things. I would never say we don't, all right? But one thing we got to understand about the dating market is it is going to be unequal. It is going to be unfair. And the men with the most money, the men that's the best looking, the men that got the most charisma, the men that got the most going on, the men that's most likable, right? They're going to get more than enough attention from women and women who are clamoring to be with them, right? While the bottom, they say 90%, definitely I would say at least 70%, right? Because I think it's a good 25 to 30% of men that, are viable for women. But then again, that number is probably shrinking. But what we're seeing in the dating market is we're seeing women going after the same men. We're seeing men who are going after women, getting shot down, right? And then realizing where their place is. But when they go to those women, the top 10% men, they have already been with those women. So now their body count is going up, right? And so you get this it's like a wave, right? And women are more promiscuous nowadays, right? They're more independent, they're working and things of that nature. So it's a lot of things that is not going in the favor of the average man. Okay. And this is the reason why we see marriage rate decline, we see birth rates decline, and things of that nature. It's a domino effect. Okay. We have to wake up. We have to start realizing that, well, number one, money shouldn't dictate everything. And 2, characteristic and character should be an important part. And stop living when it comes to people basing everything off height, how much money you make, and stuff like that. We got to stop dating like that. Okay. Now, will it change? I'm gonna be honest with you. It's gonna be hard to shift, right? It's gonna be very hard to shift. Anything's possible though. Okay, anything's possible. All right, that's the episode for today, man. Hopefully you gained a new perspective because I know I did. I learned a lot from that video. So, of course, please comment, like, share the video. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the video. And if you got any topic suggestions that we can make a case on, please hit your boy up. All right. But as always, I'm you, you are me. Love always, love eternal. Remember, the worst thing you do is lie to yourself. Deuces. One love.